Hello and welcome to another episode of History of American Trains. Today we will be talking about three streamliners that started an era in American railroading. These engines are the M10000, the Burlington Zephyr, and the Green Diamond. I'll be going through these in that order, starting with some context. In the 1920s and 30s, Art Deco was making an impact all over the world, with railroads continuing the trend by designing stations and posters in this style. The Union Pacific was looking for ways to reduce operating costs and thus purchased more than 100 McKean cars from the McKean Motor Car Company to pull passenger trains. Using this streamlined engine as inspiration, then UP President Averell Harriman asked the Pullman Standard Company about building a three-car articulated train set with a sleek car body design. The M10000 was unveiled and put into service on January 31st, 1935. The train set used a Winton 191A petrol motor, outputting 600 horsepower with a top speed of 120 miles an hour. It weighs 124 tons and used a Typhon horn. Before the engine entered service, it went on a trip around the United States for over 1 million people to see. During its visit to Washington, D.C., President Franklin D. Roosevelt came and inspected the new engine. It was later put on display at the 1934 World's Fair, where it rivaled the Burlington's Pioneer Zephyr. It was then put into revenue service between Kansas City, Missouri, and Salina, Kansas, under the Streamliner name. The railroad ordered more 10,000 series engines with minor modifications. These engines were the 10,002, 10,003, 10,004, 10,005, and 10,006. However, after a few years in service, it was clear that the aluminum design wasn't suited for the day-to-day operating life. The final strike was the M10000's engine needing costly repairs that the UP wasn't willing to pay. It was then scrapped in 1941 after accumulating over 995,000 miles in service. Around the same time that the M10000 was brought to UP, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad's president, Ralph Budd, was coming up with the idea of a lightweight, fast passenger train pulled by a diesel engine. Budd's idea for this dated back to the 1920s when he saw them being used in small switcher engines. Budd went to the Winton Train Company and requested the design. The train set would be named the Burlington Zephyr after the Greek god of the west wind, Zephyrus. Using a technique called shot welding, the slate car body design would be completed by the Budd Company in 1934. The Zephyr used a Winton 8-201A prime mover, outputting 660 horsepower with a top speed of around 112 miles an hour. It weighs 100 tons and has a horn that is similar to a Leslie A200 and a A125. In a publicity stunt, the train made a dawn-to-dusk dash from Denver to Chicago on May 26, 1934, to coincide with the opening day of the Century of Progress Fair in Chicago. All other trains were diverted until the Zephyr passed. The train made the trip in 13 hours and 5 minutes, an hour and 55 minutes earlier than what was scheduled. It later ran on another publicity train touring 31 states and 222 cities, where over 2 million people saw it before it entered service. The Burlington ordered 2 more sets, dubbed the Twin Zephyrs, which started the spread of the Zephyr name. The Burlington Zephyr was used in the making of the film Silver Streak and didn't enter revenue service until November 11, 1934. By this point, it was renamed to the Pioneer Zephyr, indicating that it was the first set built. The train set managed to earn a substantial profit, even when the Burlington Railroad thought it wouldn't. A dinette coach was added to the train, which increased ridership to 112 people in one trip. In 1939, a Zephyr train was involved in a head-on collision with a freight train, ripping the front nose apart and killing the engineer. An open switch was blamed for the wreck. In 1950, the Pioneer Zephyr crashed into a truck, injuring the fireman permanently. These wrecks called into question the safety of the train's cab and showed that the more standard behind-the-nose cabs were safer for crews in the event of a wreck. By the 1960s, the Zephyrs were all showing their age, with most being in constant service since the 30s. The main engines would be replaced by standard E5 passenger diesels in 1960, and the Pioneer Zephyr made its final run, accumulating over 3 million miles in service. The train's name was kept by Amtrak in 1971 when it took over service and still runs its California Zephyr train to this day. The Illinois Central was intrigued with streamlined train sets and quickly hopped on the trend, introducing its own streamliner named the Green Diamond, built by Pullman Standard. The train set was very similar to the M10000 set, which was likely due to both streamliners being built by the same company. The train would pull 5 articulated cars with Art Deco-inspired interiors. The Green Diamond used a Winton 201A 16-cylinder engine outputting 1,200 horsepower and operated at 60 miles an hour. Of these 3 streamliners, the Green Diamond was documented the least. However, the train had a great significance to the Illinois Central because the name was based off the railroad's logo. The train set debuted to the public in March 1936, but didn't enter revenue service until May 17th of that year. It proved to be popular with passengers, with it being featured in many advertisements. Throughout the next 10 years, the train would continue service with relatively high success and minimal changes. Because the train set couldn't be uncoupled, there was a limited amount of flexibility when it came to adding more coaches or switching out an engine. If the main motor broke, that meant that the entire train set would be out of service, making last-minute changes a pain. In 1947, the set was sent to the Illinois Central's Paducah shops for a major overhaul. This overhaul gave the Streamliner the ability to uncouple from its coaches, and regular diesel locomotives could now fill in if needed. However, in April of the same year, the Streamline set was replaced with conventional equipment, thus ending the train set's 11-year career. By the late 1940s, Art Deco was in decline in advertisements, and conventional engines like the F&E units were proving to be more reliable and flexible than a one-unit train set. Thus, all of the original Streamliners were retired in favor of the up-and-coming diesels. However, some examples of these Streamliners still exist today, with the Pioneer and Mark Twain Zephyr being preserved. While the Streamliners weren't a complete replacement for steam engines, they showed American passengers the luxuries that the railroad brought them and inspired high-speed trains of the 21st century. They will always be a reminder of the golden days of passenger railroading in America. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to all the following sources and people for their videos and pictures. Next episode, I will be taking a look at the J3 Hudson.